Players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most revered in the history of Magic the Gathering. Force of Will, Surgical Extraction, Leyline of the Void, and many others, battling head-to-head in brutal What's that? Got turn 1 by oops. It's game 2, that's the match. Brought in 10 sideboard cards and I'm still dead? Okay, cool. I guess I'll go do something else then.
The Eternal Glory podcast is brought to you by the minds behind Bosch and Roll on YouTube, Arabian University, and theepicstorm.com. This episode is sponsored by Moxfield and financial advisor and certified financial planner Nicholas Robb.
Hello, and welcome to episode 152 of the Eternal Glory podcast, The Bands We Need. We've already recorded 30 minutes of introduction and banter for the week, available in our supporter-exclusive pre-show. Check out patreon.com/eternalglory to gain access, or join as a YouTube member for the same content on YouTube instead. As always, I'm Phil Gallagher, aka Thraben U.
I'm Brian Coval, aka Bosch and Roll.
And I'm Brian Cook of The Epic Storm.
Join our Patreon for that pre-show where, man, we talked about a lot today. We barely talked about Magic. I don't even know. I blacked out. Anything could be said in there.
Did you black out and fall into a puddle of your own vomit?
Someone did. Join the pre-show to find out.
To win in Magic, adjust your strategy as the game changes. The same is true of investments. Nicholas Robb, financial advisor and certified financial planner, can help you create a game plan for your financial goals. Call 314-968-3783 or email nicholas.ropp@edwardjones.com. That's nicholas.raupp@edwardjones.com to get started today. Edward Jones, member SIPC.
And if you're interested in advertising to 10,000 plus Eternal gamers every episode, reach out to us. We're always accepting new sponsors.
All right, so this week is going to be our Big Ban episode, and we wanted to get this out a couple of weeks before the BNR update. That way, all of the people at Wizards of the Coast who clearly listen to us at all times and take our advice can hear what we have to say before they have to make all of our decisions. So there's the wink, wink, nudge, nudge for all the conspiracy theorists out there. You can take your tinfoil hats off now.
I don't know if you saw, but Fire Shoes tweeted that Wizards, in a recent BNR update, said that they had written it 3 weeks prior to the BNR update. So they had made their decision 3 weeks earlier. So it kind of lines up with what we're doing here today.
I think that was from the Pauper one, and the Pauper panel functions a little differently than the normal, like, mainstream bans. But yeah, like Gavin was saying, we had come to these conclusions before these big events over the last 2 weeks that, you know, the cards we're about to ban made up most of the top 8 of 2 big events. That's where that was from. But yeah, I mean, the sooner we can plant the seed, the better, if we have thoughts that we'd like to share.
We do want to start with a bit of a caveat about data, though. We are going to present a very, very small amount of data in this episode, but as far as the big stuff goes, we don't have that. Wizards of the Coast has that, Daybreak Game has that, but we don't. We can look at league results, we can look at challenge results, but in the grand scheme of all the Magic that is being played, even just online, this is a relatively small amount of data in comparison to all of the Legacy or any other format that is being played.
Right, and there's a lot of people who bang the data drum, where it's, you know, we're all unthinking robots. There's this line, 55% win rate, where now action must be taken. At 54.5%, action must not be taken. At 52%, but the play patterns are miserable. It's fine because 52% is not an actionable line. First of all, like Phil said, we don't have the data, the complete data set to even make that decision, much less understand it, or, you know, we don't actually know what Wizards' line is. They do not publish like a 55% win rate is a problem. A 54.5% win rate is not. We have some stuff that's been said in the past. And over the last several weeks, I have seen voices in the Legacy community confidently use the same data set to make opposite arguments. And clearly, whether intentional or implicit biases come out. And the second thing you learn after how to understand statistics is how to lie with them. And that is like, I have a degree where I need to use a lot of statistics to do what I do. And we were warned from the jump in all of my college courses how to remain neutral, how to not skew data, whether we mean to or not, how to get away from our own biases. And there are a lot of smart people, statisticians and stuff in the Magic community, but there's also a lot of people who are just looking at numbers and saying this is too high or this is not too high and manipulating it to their whim. So who knows? That is not to say anyone's a bad actor. It's just to say nobody, you or I or anyone listening, can make a fully sound data-based argument because we simply don't have the numbers.
Another thing is if you look at the last BNR update, they made a change based on something that had nothing to do with data. Soy Myco Spawn was banned, and it was banned because it created a miserable play experience, not because the Eldrazi deck was by far the best thing in the format. It was banned because it was miserable and it was invalidating other archetypes. And I think we're not going to spend a lot of time on it today, but one of the decks is invalidating a lot of different decks, and you could argue even an archetype.
Right. And I want to close out this caveat by telling a little story from my past life where I had a day job before I was a full-time Magic content creator. I had a job where I had access to more information than most of the people I worked with. I worked in a school, and I was in a position where I would frequently have a working lunch with the entire school admin team, and then I would go walk into classrooms. And what the teachers and the instructional aides thought they needed or thought were obvious solutions from their perspective just sounded so annoying, entitled, and wrong to me, who had more information than they did. And I don't know that it's fair to call them annoying, entitled, or wrong, but it's like the 20 blind men describing an elephant. Like each one will say, an elephant is long and kind of pointy and very hard. Another will say an elephant is like a scratchy blanket. Another will say an elephant is like a tree. None of them are wrong, but none of them have the picture because they don't have the information. And every single Magic player out here is a blind man touching part of an elephant.
Hear, hear. All right. So our pod very much has had a position for a long time that we need some bans from Oops All Spells. Since prior to the previous BNR update, we were campaigning for that. And since we've already spent 4 months talking about this, we're not going to rehash it all today, and we are simply going to state that it is our belief that both Undercity Informer and Balustrade Spy should go from the format.
And I'm going to just put a toe in the next conversation, which is Blue-Black Reanimator, which is going to be the bulk of the episode, and then pull that toe out and then do this sequentially. There is the shave a little off the top option. In the past BNR update, I was advocating for Undercity Informer to be banned. Leave Balustrade Spy, let them have a half Oops, half Belcher, or adopt Beseech the Mirror to get their one Balustrade Spy more often, or, create choke points, create some inconsistency, but let the deck continue to exist. If Wizards of the Coast takes that posture, I won't be rioting, I won't be beside myself, but I do not think that posture is what they should do anymore. Goblin Charbelcher decks are still legal. The Necropotence deck, the all-in Necropotence deck, or Necrodominance deck. Yeah, you wish you had Necropotence, you sickos. The all-in Necrodom deck. There are some all-in Beseech style Storm decks. Even the Epic Gamble is a deck that can send it on turn 1 with some reliability. There's a lot of ways that you can have a turn 1 legacy experience. Go all in with Dark Ritual or whatever your variation of mana is. And I don't think we need Oops All Spells to even exist anymore to protect that play pattern. It exists elsewhere in a way that is more reasonable.
I would agree. And as someone who plays a lot of combo, I was called a hypocrite in the comments of one of my recent videos. They're like, Bryant, in back-to-back games, you turn 1 your opponent. You said that Oops All Spells should be banned. It's like, well, you have to look at a couple things. You have to look at how frequent does a deck do this? Is it all the time? Is it sometimes? How often does it have backup? And then how can other decks interact? And my big thing with that is Oops All Spells gets to dodge a lot of stuff that the rest of the format doesn't. So it doesn't care about Force of Vigor. It doesn't care about Force of Negation. It can play around Surgical Extraction and Fairy Macabre. It's so resilient, and that's one of the big things about it. It's not just a turn 1 combo deck. It's a turn 1 deck that if you stop it, it goes again next turn, and the turn after that. And it has all this resiliency naturally caked in, and that's the problem. It's not that it wins on turn 1 all the time. We've had decks like Belcher since the beginning days of Legacy. The issue is that it's Belcher that keeps on coming back, and it's tough to kill.
Yeah, I recorded with Oops All Spells yesterday. My plan was just, do it as a joke. I'll release it on June 30th and hope that it coincides with the ban update. I released a Sowing Mycospawn deck the day of the last ban update, nailed that one. And my plan was just, I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just going to throw this deck into a league and release it on the day. I went 5-0, 10-0. I did not lose a game, and it wasn't particularly hard. My round 1, I'm not going to recoup the whole video here, but my round 1, I was on the draw. I mulled a 5. I sent on turn 1. They forced my guy. Turn 2, I reanimated my guy, and they died. And then over the course of this league, I beat Leyline of the Void, Grafdigger's Cage. I beat a Daze plus Force of Will on the draw in game 1, on turn 1. I also beat turn 1 Archon of Emeria. I beat a turn 1 Chalice of the Void while my 6-card hand had 2 Dark Rituals in it. It was a joke. I was running through this league like butter, and I don't even know what I'm doing. I don't even know if I sideboarded correctly. I don't even know if my list was good. It's so silly that happened. And in addition to all the free wins or hyper resilient early wins you get, the games that were air quotes interesting got that way because somebody went in the garbage, to put it that way. I had an opponent who kept on the play Basic Swamp, Thoughtseize, Force of Will, Consigned to Memory, 2 other blue cards. And that game was only air quotes interesting because they Thoughtseized my original piece of interaction. Then I had to slow down. I saw their hand at one point, saw all the pieces I had to work through, and eventually I just cast a Poxwalker and went to town. And they didn't want to force that. But that game was not actually interesting. I was never under any threat because their Basic Swamp and handful of Force of Wills didn't actually push back on me at all. I had all the time in the world to sculpt. I just picked apart those 2 Force of Wills and Consigned to Memory one after the other on subsequent turns. The game lasted 8 or 9 turns, I think, but it was not actually interesting. I don't know. It's just so rancid. I had another opponent mulled a 4, turn 1 a Grafdigger's Cage, and then never cast a spell, and I had infinite time to figure it out. But they would have just died if they didn't do that. I don't know. It just sucks.
I would agree that the play patterns are really bad.
I have seen a lot of die-hard grinders try to point to the data and say, the deck is fine, Oops All Spells isn't winning that much. And I feel like that just ignores everyone who is not playing a hyper-optimized Tier 1 Legacy deck with blue in it. Because my experience trying to play any sort of brew into Oops All Spells is just an unmitigated disaster every time. I just feel like from the time they bolt themselves on turn 1, I just know that I'm going to lose the matchup, even with a playset of ley lines in the board.
But it also doesn't account for the people that have just quit playing. Because Oops All Spells and Reanimator over the last year and a half, a lot of people are just so sick of what we've been dealing with that they're not playing and they're starting to sell stuff off. We'll talk more about this later when it comes to the cadence of the BNR updates, but people are just done dealing with Oops All Spells and Demir Reanimator.
I think my big, message here is it is a mistake to look at only win rate data here. If you look at Oops and see that the win rate is not high enough to warrant bans, please look at community sentiment on this one. Please look at what it is doing to deck building. Look at the gameplay experience. This is not enjoyable gameplay. And I feel it as a content creator. My viewers feel it. I have seen so much just vitriolic hatred for this deck online. Action needs to be taken here.
And as we said at the top of the episode, we don't have all the data. We do have a chunk of data. Shout out to Joe Dyer and the Legacy data collection crew. Oops All Spells has the most pieces in the data set, 166 players. Demir Tempo has 159. That's the next one. Then it's a steep drop to 139. But 166, it's the most represented deck in this data set. and it has a 51.7% non-mirror win rate, which, it's not losing. That's not 42. It's not like this curiosity that exists. And like the difference between a 55% win rate and a 52% win rate, like if the 52% is miserable, but 55 is like the hard number where we take action, I don't know. I don't buy it. The deck is winning, and it was for quite some time the number 1 or 2 deck in both play and win rates. And the metagame has warped entirely around this existence to drag it kicking and screaming down to just 52%. Like, even the numbers, I don't know. This isn't necessarily a number band, but the numbers are pretty bad too.
Before we close out Oops All Spells, I would like to back what Brian said at the start of this, where I believe that they shouldn't be Undercity Former or Balustrade Spy. It should be both. I know some Oops players, and they're like, oh yeah, if you just ban one, we play 4 copies of Lively Dirge instead of 1, which is a weird Entomb/Reanimate hybrid that you can kick twice. They don't even have to play Beseech the Mirror. Initially, I was thinking they'd have to up the Chromox count and then play Beseech the Mirror to then go get the Balustrade Spy or Undercity Informer. Not the case at all. They just play Lively Dirge and search their deck, put it to the graveyard, and then put it into play. And there's no priority check in between. Like, it goes to the graveyard and then just goes into play. It's not like you then have priority to Fairy Macabre the creature. So that doesn't work either. So I don't think that hitting one is even acceptable. I think has to be both. Like, it exploits a rules issue or a rules thing with the MDFCs. That should be part of the reason it goes. It's no different from Valky or the Cascade stuff. Like, it's abusing a loophole in Magic. Just get rid of it.
Yeah, I posted a meme the other day, just goofing around, because I had a shower thought about the card Hermit Druid, a card that has been banned since the invention of Legacy. I don't really know what was going on in Type 1.5. I didn't play that format, but in 2004, Legacy, as we know it today, was formed, and Hermit Druid was on the original ban list. Hermit Druid is a 2-mana 1/1 that you can pay a green and tap it to mill cards till you hit a basic land and put the basic land in your hand. Is that harder or easier to enable a combo with than resolve a 4-drop? Like Hermit Druid seems more powerful than Cephalid Illusionist, but way less powerful than Balustrade Spy in terms of flipping your deck into your graveyard to make something happen. And like, is Hermit Druid even okay for Legacy? Like, it might be. Certainly we can either ban Balustrade Spy or unban Hermit Druid. I think Hermit Druid would see almost no play if it was unbanned. But that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm saying Hermit Druid is banned, should be banned, and so should these stupid things.
All right. Any final Oops thoughts, or are we ready to talk about Reanimator?
No thoughts, head empty. Let's talk about Reanimator.
All right, so this has been our boogeyman of the format for multiple BNR cycles now. So, Grief has been banned, Psychic Frog has been banned, and Troll of Khazad-dûm have been banned, all from this same deck. Now, let's be clear here. Grief is a problematic card. The whole Grief Reanimate thing was very, very toxic, even outside of the Reanimator shell. And Psychic Frog was cracked. We don't get to play Dreadhorde Arcanist type cards in Legacy. They just get out of control when backed by Force of Will and Daze. Troll, though, was banned because of its role specifically in Reanimator and what it was doing with the mana base. It had previously really helped with the Grief Black count previously. It was just a very low opportunity cost to play since it cantripped by itself. And Reanimator is back. 15% on MTG Goldfish as of today, 19% on MTG Top 8, one of the most winning decks in the format currently.
Yeah, it's the most. The data set that we have from Joe Dyer and his team, 55.6%.
Up to a full 56 if you exclude some of the mirrors.
Oh, yeah, right. Yep.
Like, it's wild. That is a very, very good win rate. And contextualizing this, it has this win rate in a world where Oops and Reanimator, 2 graveyard-based combo decks, are the things you are gunning for. So in the world of graveyard hate, sometimes being pushed into the deck in game 1, like we've seen plenty of Spellbomb type cards in game 1 in the current format, it is still this successful.
Yeah, we used to talk about the Dredge cycle, where Dredge would win a tournament. The next weekend, everyone would be packing Graveyard Hate, and Dredge would be pushed into the ground. And then the weekend after that, it was smart to play Dredge again because Dredge didn't win last weekend. We all know that Reanimator stuff is going to happen. It's 2 of the top 4 decks, and has been for a year now. We know. We're main decking Nile Spellbombs. We've got Soul Guide Lanterns. We got all sorts of stuff. Every sideboard starts with however many Leyline of the Voids you can afford. We know. It's not a surprise. It's never off cycle, and it's still doing this.
Another thing is, if you look at the Demir decks, they've started to adopt main deck copies of Dathi Voidwalker, both Demir Tempo and Demir Reanimator. So they're teching out, knowing they're going to face each other in game 1. So we're truly at the inbred Demir metagame, outside of Oops All Spells.
Finding the path where we got here, I think, is kind of interesting, because Reanimator did dip off right after the troll ban. I think people were maybe just excited to do something else and then eventually found the package again. But there is a bit of a thread where we were worried about show and tell, which is nowhere in the metagame now. That did not come to fruition. Both the ban cycle and the release of Tarkir Dragonstorm introducing Mistrise Village happened at basically the same time 3 months ago. And where's show and tell? It is buried under a sea of Thoughtseizes. Demir Tempo has emerged as, I guess, the hero we needed. Steady pressure with Thoughtseize Wasteland Days Force of Will, breaking down anyone trying to do anything even a little bit interesting. And that's part of why Oops has fallen off a bit. Show and Tell doesn't exist. Nadu was big for a while, has fallen down to like a low top 10 deck. And Demir did all that. And the difference between Demir and the Izzet decks or Temur decks, even with the addition of Corey Steelcutter, which is a super cool addition to Legacy, they simply don't have Thoughtseize. And the best way to break open a Tempo Mirror, if you're playing Demir anyway, is Reanimate Archon of Cruelty. And I think that's the path we've been on. And that's kind of the story that played out over the last 3 months. But now we're in it. We're in the lock. We have reached the final form, I think.
And it's weird because when you play against the Reanimator deck, the gameplay is often reasonable and good, but it is incredibly difficult to respect their fair and unfair game plans at the same time, even when you know the options exist. So I often find myself saying, like, I can beat them if they are on a tempo game this game, but if they are on the Reanimator plan and they just turn to Animate Dead me, I am fully dead to that, and there is nothing that I can do. And similarly, there's other games where it's like, okay, well, shit, I have this endurance. Do I need to use this endurance right now so they can't cast a Murktide Regent? Or do I need to hold this endurance so that if they try to put an Atraxa or an Archon of Cruelty into play, I can answer that? And you end up in these damned if you do, damned if you don't situations where you frequently are going to lose out if you play too conservatively and lose out if you don't play aggressively enough.
I think we would all agree that Leyline of the Void is the best hate piece against Oops All Spells, and Demir Reanimator has this perfect card that threads the needle between their primary game plan as a tempo deck and the backup game plan as a Reanimator deck, and that's Brazen Borrower. They play 3 of it main deck, and it's just the best thing to have against Leyline of the Void. So you mulligan to Leyline, you're like, okay, I've mulliganed to 6, I have a reasonable hand, the Leyline's in play. You're now on 5 cards against a deck with Days Wasteland, Thoughtseize, Force of Will. And you're like, okay, I just need to like draw a card here or there, and maybe I can be in it. But then they're a tempo deck too. They just go, okay, turn 1 Tamiyo, turn 2 Dathi Voidwalker, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is awkward. They cantrip into Brazen Borrower, bounce your Leyline, and you're like, oh, glad I mulliganed into this while they opened up on Tamiyo. And you're kind of just like, what am I doing with my life? Because it's not like the classic Reanimator deck that can't beat a Leyline. They just don't care. Or they don't even try until they find their Brazen Borrower, and then they go, oops, Entomb Reanimate, GG.
Yeah, I have a whole section on this later, and I'll decide in a minute or two if I'm going to reorganize the notes to make this make more sense. But Brazen Borrower is the 8th most played non-land card in Legacy. It is the 3rd most played creature, after Orcish Bowmasters and Tamiyo Inquisitive Student at number 1. And I'll hold for a second, but I will revisit this thought because I have a whole section on it. But yeah, Brazen Borrower, top 8 most played card in Legacy and 3rd most played creature. And it's mostly a boomerang. The 3rd most played creature in Legacy is a boomerang. And the 1st most played creature does not deal damage. It's coming. I've got more. Don't worry.
All right. So if we need to address something from this deck, which I think we need to do, Reanimator has been made closer to a reasonable deck, but I think it is still over the line. Then Entomb is the clear ban if we need to do something about this archetype.
I would agree that I believe it's Entomb. And we talked about this in the last BNR cycle, where if you look at the language that they use for banning Survival of the Fittest, they talked about power creep of creatures over time and how creatures get better and better, and it makes these cards that tutor for creatures better over time. We've reached the point where Entomb now has Archon of Cruelty and Atraxa Grand Unifier. And I made a YouTube short where, it was just a short of the day, like, look at the data of Blue-Black Reanimator right now. And people are like, ban Atraxa, don't ban Entomb. And that's something you could do. And I understand that, but are you just going to ban every large creature that comes out for the next 20 plus years? And also, Atraxa sees play because of Orcish Bowmasters. Phil and I had this joke for the last couple years, Atraxa versus Gristlebrand, which one's actually better. But I believe that in a world without Orcish Bowmasters, Gristlebrand would probably see play right now. And if you ban Atraxa, Gristlebrand just slides right in. It's a little bit different from Atraxa, but not enough to make a huge impact.
Yeah, I think it is very easy to replace any creature if you ban something like Atraxa. That doesn't really make any sense to me. Atraxa is great and all, but I kind of want the show and tell players to be able to play Atraxa,
Right, and I'm going to pop off here. As you guys have probably seen, I just copy-pasted a huge section of our notes to here because this thread is connected. I'll briefly say Reanimate is still there. Reanimate, if they want to keep Troll banned and then shave another piece off to slow down Reanimator a little bit, Reanimate is there. Now every reanimation spell either costs 2 or has some weird condition attached, or both, which would slow it down a little bit, but maybe not enough. But there is another Skywalker, as they say. And this is some lateral thinking that might get us here, but it's something that I think might happen anyway and might help with Reanimator without breaking up Entomb Reanimate for people who like that sort of thing. Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student. We talked about Ragavan, we've talked about Psychic Frog, we've talked about Dreadhorde Arcanist. The difference between Tamiyo and those cards is she doesn't deal damage, but Dreadhorde Arcanist attacks for 1. Damage wasn't really the problem with that card. Psychic Frog was, I think, the most broken of all these cards. I think Frog is actually more broken than Ragavan by a lot. Frog's on its own island. Ragavan, yeah, it's a problem, but it was relatively modest size. It didn't fly, had 1 toughness. You could eventually get ahead of that thing. I think Tamiyo is this card. When Frog was legal, I talked a lot about moneyballing more frogs into your deck by playing Nethergoyf and Tamiyo because together they make Psychic Frog. They hit for damage while drawing cards. But Tamiyo might be doing enough on its own to prop this up. The Reanimator deck, imagine if the Reanimator deck in its current form, instead of 4 Tamiyos, had to play something like Nethergoyf or, Delver of Secrets. What would they even play in that spot that hangs with everything that Tamiyo offers? It's a draw engine, it's a mana sink, it combos with Brainstorm, a card we're going to play anyway. The Planeswalker wins the game on its own relatively quickly and protects itself from chip shot damage. I was talking about the most played creatures in Legacy. The number 1 played creature is Tamiyo. The second most played creature is Orcish Bowmaster. Orcish Bowmaster cannot attack Tamiyo Planeswalker for damage unless you have drawn cards into it at some point. That's a lock. It's blue. Tamiyo pitches 2 forces, which mitigates the legendary drawback. Also, the front and back of Tamiyo have different names, which also mitigates the legendary drawback. There's a lot going on with Tamiyo that is also subsidizing this Reanimator shell. And I think it's time that Tamiyo gets a real look as, is this a Ragavan Dreadhorde Arcanist Psychic Frog analog at the point where it is a problem and action needs to be taken? And if we take this action, can we save Entomb Reanimate play patterns for the people who enjoy that? And my last thought here, I will open up the floor for conversation. I've talked a bit about the most played creatures in the format. I have those numbers. Tamiyo, number 1. This does not attack for damage. Then it flips into a Planeswalker that draws cards. Orcish Bowmasters. This one does have power and toughness. It is sometimes a relevant combat object. It's mostly about turning off cantrip suites. Brazen Borrower. That's Boomerang. Those are the top 3 things. Murktide Regent. We've finally got a Brawler. The 4th most played creature in Legacy in 27% of decks to Tamiyo's 41. This is a creature with stats. This is a rate monster. It has power toughness. There's not much more to it. And then the next 2 most played creatures are Atraxa and Archon. They technically attack, but that's not really what they're about. The next most played creature, Simian fucking Spirit Guide. Yeah, this is what creatures are reduced to. The next one after that, Thassa's Oracle. The next one after that, finally another Brawler, Barrogoyf. We have to go this far. We have Murktide Regent and Barrogoyf in the top 10 played creatures of our format. After that, it's Nadu, Nomad, Narcomoeba, Endurance, Emrakul, Cephalid Illusionist, Glaring Fleshraker, and then we get Nethergoyf as the next Brawler on the list. And now, the bigger fundamental question is, should Legacy be about attacking and blocking in some regard? And there are decks like Stompy that are still doing that, but I just read the top 15 creatures in this format, and 3 of them are built for attacking and blocking. The rest are either combo payoffs or combo enablers. And I will cede the floor. Gentlemen, go off.
All right, I'll start. I expect that within a year, Tamiyo will be banned in Legacy. I don't know if this is the moment for it. I would not be sad if it happened, but I think that card has been quietly good for a while, and now we are reaching the point where it is very obvious the impact that this is having. I am seeing in a lot of my personal games that it's actually quite hard to answer, because if your opponent sits there with a Brainstorm available, a single target removal spell does not actually kill that Planeswalker. If you've got Fatal Push and your opponent has mana available, can you even use that to answer the Tamiyo? And a lot of times the answer is like, no, if I do that, it is an absolutely massive blowout. So it can be frustrating. Sometimes the Tamiyo will like run into ancillary problems where like someone has a main deck Collector Oof and now all of the clues are off and the Tamiyo has gotten worse or something like that. Or someone has a main deck Pithing Needle and the Planeswalker side is randomly off. And like it will occasionally hit downside. But I think the upside is very, very high, despite the fact that you do need to use mana to cash in those clues.
That is what I wanted to talk about, Phil, is unlike Ragavan or Dreadhorde Arcanist or Psychic Frog, Tamiyo requires a 2-mana investment every turn. And it's a card that people in Vintage are playing right now in Doomsday, because they're like, oh, yeah, because it's basically a lightning bolt, so that way your Psychic Frog lives, and if Frog connects, you just draw into Gush and win. But the biggest thing that I've noticed is, wow, paying 2 mana to draw a card is so bad. And to bring this back to Legacy, comparing, Dreadhorde Arcanist to Tamiyo doesn't feel like 1-to-1 to me. It feels like 1 to 0.5. Like, they're pretty similar. I'm not trying to say Brian's wrong here. Like, Tamiyo is very, very powerful. It just feels a little different to me, considering it requires you to pay 2 mana on turn 2, so you're not advancing your game plan on turn 2 in order to draw that card. Like, it feels different. And as a combo person, I will admit that Tamiyo is not quite as good against me as it would be against somebody like Phil trying to play a longer game plan. I think Tamiyo deserves a little bit longer, personally, to stick around and see if it's actually the issue. I could be wrong. Maybe they axed Tamiyo on the 30th. But if I were on the Legacy panel right now talking about what we should be looking at for the 30th, I'd be looking at Entomb or down the list Reanimate. I think it's too soon to ban Tamiyo, personally.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out, which I know you know, but paying 2 to draw the card can happen anytime, and Tamiyo being a 1-drop, like, there are games where I attack 6 times before I crack my first clue, and for every one of those 6 turns, other things are happening. It's like, I follow up my Tamiyo with an Up the Beanstalk. Now that needs an answer. And then I follow up my Tamiyo with, I don't know, Murktide Regent, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Orcish Bowmaster, whatever else is in your deck. And that's actually doing damage. I got to answer that now. And then, turn 6, I crack a couple clues, replace all those cards. If Tamiyo read, when this creature attacks, you may pay 2 if you do draw a card. That's different than just parking a clue in play for whenever you're convenient to reach for it. Like, I know it's not A to B or A to A. It is, like you said, 0.5 versus 1. The card's not comped, but like Arcanist, you had to have something in your graveyard. The card's not comped there either. Like, some work is required. Ragavan has to get through. Some work is required. I do not think Tamiyo is as busted as those 3 cards I'm comparing it to, but I think it's in the conversation much closer than anyone thought when she was first released.
So my big thing with Tamiyo is that she is not a bad draw late game. Like, let's say it's turn 8. You have exhausted each other's resources, and you normally top deck a 1-drop. That is not good. But with Tamiyo, that 1-drop attacks, you draw a new card next turn, and anything else you get from there is just absolutely insane value. So Tamiyo is a must-answer card in the early game and a must-answer card in the late game still. I think I'm going to use this as a point to transition. What I want to think about next is actually, like, okay, so there's this very clear level of action that needs to be taken. Something's got to go from Oops, and Entomb probably needs to go. But beyond that, is there other things that we should be doing in thinking about Legacy's health? And I think Tamiyo starts to fall in that secondary tier of cards that we should be examining.
I think when I think about the health of any format, I think about moxfield.com, where I host all my decks, and you could see all of the history of how Legacy evolves basically through the decks I play on my channel. They're still up there. You can go back, scroll back. I have hundreds of decks posted. You could start brewing for what you think the post-ban world's going to look like. You could flesh out that deck that we just talked about. What does current blue-black Reanimator look like if you don't have Tamiyo? What do you replace it with? And Moxfield even has a game simulator where you can goldfish hands and see how they feel. Shout out to moxfield.com.
I love the way you think, Brian. You put all my deck lists on Moxfield. I would definitely go check that out.
Okay, so the thing Phil was actually talking about. So we have this kind of under the surface level where there are a number of cards that are powerful and probably miserable that aren't currently getting the flack they deserve because Oops All Spells and Reanimator exist and are condensing the games to such a point where we don't get to worry about Tamiyo, who I have actually convinced myself over the past 72 hours that Tamiyo belongs not on the list we're talking about, but on the list above. I think Tamiyo could be banned on the 30th and Legacy would be better for it. Under the surface, what's below that? I mean, what do we not really enjoy playing against, but is currently invisible because it doesn't win the game on turn 0?
It's fucking Nadu, man. I detest this card for multiple BNR periods. Every time I have said, I fucking hate Nadu. I don't like playing against this card, but I really can't justify banning it right now. And we come to yet another BNR cycle where I'm going to say the same thing. I think Nadu is just right there in terms of acceptable power level of Legacy, but it is a very, very bad gameplay experience. I recorded with a Nadu Landfall deck today, utilizing Scythecat Cub and stuff like that, and Traveling Chocobo. And I started popping off with Nadu and Scythecat Cub and Bristly Bill. And my opponent in chat, who was having a good time, was like, man, I fucking hate Nadu, but cool deck.
Yeah, so one of the, I believe, to be lazy and intellectually dishonest arguments in favor of Oops All Spells is basically, F your feelings. The numbers don't add up here. But, feelings do matter. Player satisfaction does matter. How many people are joining tournaments, how many people are buying cards, it matters. And don't feel it with Nadu. I don't think the card is over the line necessarily. I think that in all situations, it needs a layup. You need the Nomad or the Shuko to be there for Nadu to start doing the thing that it does. Obviously, it sucks. I've been in the spot where I control the first 4 permanents my opponent plays, and then their Urza Saga pops out a Shuko, and they top deck on Nadu, and I lose instantly. That could have been a lot of Legacy cards by that point, after you have a bunch of exchanges and gameplay emerges back and forth, and 2 different game objects, each of which cost mana, have made it to the battlefield and stayed there. Now something really powerful is occurring. I don't think that's out of line for Legacy. And One thing that's come up in a couple of conversations I've had lately is the Legacy Nadu decks are pretty honest the way they come by it. Like there's the breakfast one where when they start targeting, the game is over. And then there's the mid-range one where they will put like 8 cards in their hand every turn and eventually overwhelm you with what they have. It's not like the modern one where we had to demonstrate confusing rules loops and bestow Springheart Nantuko onto Endurance to demonstrate an infinite loop where each time we cycle through our whole deck, we net 1 green mana or whatever. That is not what's happening in our format. And I think the Nadu decks are pretty clean, even if they are really boring.
I will say this from the combo perspective is I will have games where my opponent will have a Shuko in play, and then they play Nadu, and they go, trigger choice pass. And I'm just like, oh yeah, that wasn't that bad. So like I get that if you don't have the spot removal as a fair deck, it's probably more scary. But I'm just like relieved sometimes where I'm like, oh, it's just a 3 mana draw 2 here. Like that's all that this turn is going to be. And I'm like, okay, I get another chance to untap and kill you now. And that doesn't feel overly scary from my position. That said, I don't play fair decks too often.
Yeah, even from the fair deck perspective, you don't really get a pretty cool game. Like, Swords to Plowshares has targets in these matchups. Prismatic Ending has targets. Force of Will has targets. Dress Down has application. Cards like Wrath of the Skies out of the sideboard. Decks like that just are not getting played right now because they can't keep up with the discard-fueled turbo combo decks. You would be kind of insane to play those decks right now, even though I do like those decks positioned versus a deck like Blue-Black Tempo. But Prismatic Ending does not manage Archon of Cruelty in a way that is effective to bring those into the metagame.
I think the frustrating thing from the fair seat perspective is that you just have to accept that like a Nomads and a Nadu in a fair capacity is just a game-winning play and just concede the game to it rather than play out the next 5 minutes of gameplay where they get, 2 turn cycles, their turn and your turn worth of cards. You're just not beating that. Just like concede and move on with your life. I think you just have to accept that.
Yeah, I mean, I say that in my videos all the time. I'm just like, I value my time here on this planet. I'm going to concede. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I conceded KCI in Modern all the time. Like, when your opponent has the loop, just know when to pick it up. And to me, if they draw 8 cards per turn cycle or 16 cards per turn cycle with Nadu plus Nomads, like, yeah, just know when to pick it up. That's how I feel. But a card that I think needs more attention is the One Ring. From both a combo perspective and a fair perspective, I just don't think it's very interesting anymore, and I'm kind of sick of it. It's not overly powerful. It isn't a huge part of the metagame. I'm just so sick of building my decks around it. And I think that's like honestly what I'm tired of. As someone who plays combo, you're like, oh, and now I have to play these 2 bad slots so that way I can beat the One Ring. And it does it in every single deck. It's like, okay, what am I going to do about the One Ring? And it's just a deck building constraint that I don't think is particularly fun. And then if you play fair games, they all come down to the ring. Like if you're playing against Moonstompy, you stop the initial card, you stop their secondary threat, which might be like a Broadside Bombardiers. But it turns out that those were all just set up to resolve the One Ring to actually put you in the dirt. And giving Moonstompy inevitability off of Ancient Tomb and City of Traders just feels so wild to me and out of place. And on top of that, the Broadside Bombardiers flings it at me for 6 damage. How is that right? You get to draw 4 cards and then deal me 6 with it before you kill yourself? That's just not right. Come on, Phil.
Yeah, and it just like incidentally gets rid of the One Ring that otherwise would kill you. That's good deck building in air quotes.
Yeah, I've said a lot of words on this podcast and on my channel about the card Kozilek's Command and why do the colorless ramp, Ancient Tomb, Tron styled decks, why do they need to be subsidized by this hyper versatile instant speed spell that does everything those decks want? And I'm not talking about that card today, but the One Ring also subsidizes those mono brown Ancient Tomb mana bases in a way that is really annoying and kind of like the color pie, the cost of doing business. If you want 4 mana on turn 2, then your deck should be weak to certain things because the Magic the Gathering resource system does not give everyone 4 mana on turn 2. What is the cost of doing this? And in the past, it's been you're probably bad to Blood Moon, you're probably bad to Wasteland, you probably don't have good removal, you have to play cards like Dismember. That's where Kozilek's Command comes in. You're probably weak to combo, but Kozilek's Command can also break up graveyard stuff. Like, that's happening. And you're probably pretty bad at card advantage. Or your card advantage comes in the form of something like Mystic Forge, or a Planeswalker like Karn, who has to take some steps to get the card. The One Ring, while technically any deck can play it, it's an Ancient Tomb card, let's be serious. And as we've seen the format and deck building evolve, the One Ring was just like in some decks for a little while. And now, if you're playing Ancient Tomb and not the One Ring, you're probably wrong. It's in Show and Tell decks, it's in Painter decks, it's in Red Stompy. It is, I think, the greatest defender. And those are the fair applications. It's also a almost self-contained combo engine in the decks like Mystic Forge combo, which only plays 2 Mystic Forges, by the way. It's the One Ring combo. Let's change the name of that deck. The various Tony Scapone blue PO ring decks. Paradox Engine is a Fringe Legacy staple right now. That was not true before people started cracking the One Ring shells. Like, One Ring plus Paradox Engine draws your deck, and then you win. This card is both broken in fair and a self-contained combo engine that, even at the base, is just Time Walk plus Ancestral Recall for the combo deck to sculpt a little more, even if the ring itself doesn't pay into the combo. It's just like a way for them to buy time and pull ahead. I think the One Ring is eventually going to be banned in Legacy. I just don't know when that's going to rise to the surface.
I 100% agree with that statement. And I think decks won't miss it. Like, obviously, it's very good, but I think every deck that exists with the One Ring in it can exist without the One Ring. You just make slightly worse versions of those decks. You put more creatures into those decks, so you are more threat dense. You lean on extra Eldrazi. Maybe Thought-Knot Seer comes back in that colorless shell. You max out on your actual Mystic Forges. Like, life goes on without the One Ring very, very easily.
I think Tony Scapone is the loser if One Ring gets banned. A number of his, like the blue PO one I mentioned, or like his Jewel deck, if that can't bridge the One Ring into Jewel, does it even work? He has a colorless build that I actually took to a tournament because I thought it was really cool and powerful, and that is very much a One Ring centric combo deck. I think those decks eat crap them hardest, but in general, like, if you have to play Goblin Rabblemaster again instead of the One Ring in Red Stompy, we're fine.
I'm just looking forward to the theoretical world in which deck building opens up a little bit and I don't have to play such bad cards to beat the One Ring.
Yeah, so problems in fair, problems in unfair, problem playing against as unfair. We've completed the 4-quadrant hatred for the One Ring. The One Ring is not a game that affects, or not a card that affects the game on turn 0, so it's currently kind of buried in the meta. But if the format slows down even a little bit, that's going to rise to the top.
All right, and there's one card in this section that I was very surprised to see added to the show notes here. So Brian, can you maybe give me a little context on why this next one is on the list?
So this is Up the Beanstalk, and I don't think it should be here either, but that is a take I've seen multiple times on socials, in my YouTube comments, in my Patreon Discord. I don't know where it's coming from. This card has not dominated the metagame. If you are maybe like a diehard Jeskai control player and you just are disappointed that that's not the best way to build control anymore, maybe you could hate it there. But I think Up the Beanstalk is an appropriate legacy power level thing that requires additional deck building considerations to maximize. Like, I think we're okay here, though. I just wanted to put it here because I have heard it said.
The card that comes up the most in my comment section by far isn't Entomb, it's not Reanimate, it's not Balustrade Spy, it's Orcish Bowmasters. So I think if we don't mention it, we're leaving some number of voices out. That said, and I hope I speak for all three of us here, this podcast believes that Orcish Bowmasters is just fine. If you're trying to put your hand in the cookie jar and you get caught, that's a fine card for Legacy. Like, there should be some way of punishing the One Ring, Brainstorm, Echo of Aeons, whatever unfair thing you're doing. Orcish Bowmasters is a reasonable check on the format. If you're trying to play Glimpse of Nature, you know what? You're doing something that's broken too. So good luck eating those pings. Like, it is a reasonable card, and I don't think that Bowmasters should ever be banned in this format.
Yeah, I don't like it, but it is the correct rate and punishes the right people, and I am the right people whom it punishes in a lot of cases, and so is Bryant. Phil's the only person here who doesn't really care about a bowmaster that often.
That is not true. I fucking love casting Ocelot Prides and Mother of Runes and such.
Okay, right. Yeah, all Mother of Runes, just not even... tough crowd. Also, kills Hermit Druid. Just throwback.
We've talked about that card a couple times now. I just want to say, please don't ever unban Hermit Druid. I hate Cephalid Breakfast so effing much, it ruins my life. And it would push Cephalid Breakfast into tier 1, and I don't want that to happen.
I mean, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but would it go into Cephalid Breakfast, or would it be its own archetype that does a lot of the same things Breakfast does?
I think it would eat Breakfast, and it would just become the same deck. Like, you don't have to play Nomad Zenkor. It's like you could just play the same deck, but cut the Breakfast combo, add in 4 Hermit Druid, and you get to play 4 free slots.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you lose all your basic lands, but yeah, but if you're not playing Nomad and Shuko, Nadu doesn't do anything anymore in the shell. I don't know. Like I said 30 minutes ago, I think it is worse than, or more powerful than Cephalid Illusionist, but less powerful than Balustrade Spy. And it should be banned. It should stay banned. Are we ready to take a break, then finish this out?
Yeah. All right, welcome back. So the final question that we want to end the episode on is it time to knock the format down a peg, or is it a mistake to start thinking about like many bans at the same time and other potential problems the format might have before we address the current problems, with those current problems being Oops All Spells and Blue-Black Reanimator. These decks that can win the game using the graveyard, but don't necessarily have to use their graveyard to win.
Right. And before we get into this conversation, I want to frame it through 2 things that Carmen Clarence said on the last ban update. She was on the Daily Magic or the Weekly Magic Twitch stream talking about basic, ban philosophy. She also wrote the Legacy article last time. 2 things she said, these are paraphrased. One of them is don't expect a big shakeup in Legacy. The last 2 ban updates ago was the big one where they unleashed Mox Opal, Splinter Twin, Green Sun Zenith, all that cool stuff in Modern. And Legacy players were like, damn, do that for us. That was so cool. Modern got a huge shot in the arm. So much excitement about the format. That was a slam dunk situation that they did by having a big shakeup all at once. Carmen said don't expect that in Legacy. And the other thing she said was they try not to ban old cards because that's what Legacy is about. And we've seen this management in Vintage where there's a lot of really embarrassing artifacts that are restricted in Vintage because Mishra's Workshop has to be allowed to exist as a 4 of due to the philosophy of format management that they take. Aaron Forsyth has said we don't ban pillars, and we don't have a list of pillars. It's not like the Game Changers for EDH, where there's a public list of what they consider a pillar that we could just look at. Is Entomb a pillar? Are we going to ban Reanimate and Atraxa and everything to protect Entomb? Or is Entomb fair game under this we don't ban pillars system? We don't ban old cards. How old is Entomb? I mean, Reanimate's older than Entomb. What's the line here? Atraxa's new. Troll of Khazad-dûm's new. Tamiyo's new. Are we going to ban all those until Entomb Reanimate's okay? Or, we don't actually know where these lines are, but these are just things that have been said to us recently.
I've heard an Oops All Spells player say, well, Balustrade Spy isn't new. And, I mean, to be fair, that's true. I mean, that set came out over a decade ago at this point. So what is the line for new? Like, I don't think Wizards is going to fix MDFCs. I don't think that's a realistic thing. So, I mean, I personally don't think that Balustrade Spy is, old enough to be grandfathered in. But I remember a time period that Entomb wasn't legal in Legacy. And people in the comment sections are often like, Entomb's been around forever. It hasn't. I remember a time in which Blue-Black Reanimator or Demir Reanimator played Careful Study in Jin-Kataxis, and it was still a tier 1 deck then without Entomb. So I think it could survive without Entomb. And, there's other ways. Also, if you unban Troll of Khazad-dûm, you get those cool decks that play like Oliphant and Troll of Khazad-dûm and Reanimate in a more fair package that I think are actually pretty interesting. So there's still ways to play Reanimate. It's just you don't get the broken tutor package full of singleton powerful creatures.
So I think as far as the current format goes, I think the pod is probably in agreement that like the thing that should be done is Entomb and the two pieces from Oops.
I'm leaving the door open. I would not be sad to see Entomb go, and it would for sure fix the problem, but I'm leaving the door open for Tamiyo as a creative lateral answer to the current build of Reanimator, or shaving another piece off with Reanimate. But obviously, Entomb is the one where, if they want to slam that door closed. But as far as, and I feel like a broken record, I keep saying this, but the play pattern of I want to send it with Dark Ritual and try to win on turn one exists elsewhere. The Necrodominance deck is there. We don't need Oops All Spells for that. There is nothing that simulates Entomb Reanimate for the people who want to do that. And I think Entomb Reanimate rules as a Magic the Gathering concept. And I would like to protect that if we can. But if we can't, then Entomb must go. You know, it is what it is at this point. But I do think there are some steps that we could still try to keep Entomb around.
All right, so hypothetical, Brian. Let's say that you have insight into Wizards of the Coast. Let's say in this magical world on the 30th, they take Tamiyo. And then let's say, you know, the next quarterly update, Demir Reanimator's still on top. They just slotted in another creature, still the top deck. Do you ban Entomb then?
Yeah. Like last time around, it was Reanimate and Troll of Khazad-dûm were the things we could shave off the top, and they shaved off the Troll. Reanimate's still there, and Tamiyo has emerged. Can we get Reanimator back to being a combo deck, or are there just too many interchangeable tools at this point where it will always be able to exist in this tempo shell and will continue to be good as a tempo deck? I released on my channel 2 years ago at this point a deck called Delver Reanimator, which was just tempo Delver with Entomb and Reanimated it. It was before Grief, it was before Psychic Frog, way before any of that. We could have been doing this all along. It just wasn't that good at that time. What are the pieces that making it good now that it wasn't good 2 years ago? And can we get back to that? Or is it just too far gone? The shell's been solved and Entomb must go. I'm open to either. I just think Entomb is very cool.
And that's fair. So my biggest issue is the light touches feel terrible as someone who's heavily dedicated to the format. Knowing that I've spent the last 2 years dealing with broken problems from Grief, Psychic Frog, all this other garbage. And quarterly updates every, 3 or 4 months feel like an eternity when there's a glaring issue happening. You're like, oh, okay, the format was run for 2 weeks post-ban and now we're back to Oops or now we're back to Reanimator. It feels like every 3 or 4 months is honestly just too long. That's how I feel. Legacy is not tied to the RCQ system. It feels ridiculous to me that we are stuck in it just because it works for Modern. And those light touches, I think, just hurt the format long term because people are leaving. People are selling off their Legacy decks. They're taking extended periods of time off because they're not enjoying Legacy because the problems aren't being fixed.
Yeah, there's 2 tiers of exodus here, where the people who just don't play Legacy for a while, just put their deck in the closet, forget about it for 6 months, and then revisit later. I think we'll get them back. When Legacy's good, they'll be excited again. But at this point, selling off, it's hard to come back. In Underground Sea is what, $650, $800, depending on condition. If you sell your Legacy cards and, I don't know, buy a house, buy a car, go on an insane vacation, whatever it is that a Legacy deck is worth, most people will not be able to be excited again 6 months from now and buy back in. So, like, those people, I think we are going to lose in mass numbers, and they're never coming back. And that is a problem for sure.
I would worry about having a light touch on Reanimator this time around for that exact reason. If I were a super casual player and I, was lightly invested in Legacy to the point where I owned one deck and it was just like Reanimator survives ban wave 4 or 5 times in a row, I think I would probably be done with the format. I think there is a very real chance that I would go this isn't really for me. Like, let's go play Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's go play a bunch of Final Fantasy games. Like, I understand that sentiment, and I've seen it a decent amount online.
I will say, mostly as a joke, anyone who quits this Legacy format to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Is going to be really disappointed. Because that's what Oops All Spells is. It's Yu-Gi-Oh! Baby. That's every deck. Good luck. Don't sell your cards.
Maybe I picked the wrong card game there.
You definitely did. But yeah, of course, I I am not going to declare a mistake's been made if Entomb gets banned on the 30th. It's fine. The idea that Carmen communicated that the old cards are cool, this is what draws people to Legacy, the things you can't do anywhere else. Entomb Reanimate does not exist in the modern Plus formats, and it's bad in Vintage. Legacy is the only place where this is good. Unfortunately, it's been too good for quite some time. Good to the point where we might lose it. And, it won't hurt my feelings, but I would be a little sad to see it go. But I wouldn't, be upset about it. I wouldn't be mad the format management. I would be sad as a longtime Legacy player seeing a very cool piece of our history re-relegated to the ban list.